Hello and welcome to Virtua Boys. I had to make a video about the EON Super 64. Now, I'm going to presume that if you are watching this video, you are actively looking for a HDMI out solution for your N64, and this might just be the one for you. I'm going to talk about the pros, and I'm going to talk about the cons, because there are some cons, but ultimately we're going to try and work out if this is the right box for you. So let's start from the top. What is the EON Super 64? Well, in a nutshell, it's a small adapter that plugs into the back of your N64. It takes the analog video out from the console and it converts it into an HDMI. So you plug an HDMI cable into the little adapter, into the Super 64, and that goes into your TV. So if you're in a situation like I was, where I bought a new TV a couple of years ago, a new big 4K HDR thing, it's got no SCART inputs, so all of a sudden I couldn't plug my N64 into my TV. So I had to make a decision to. There's all these solutions for getting HDMI out of your N64, and which one was the best for me? And I did loads and loads and loads of research, and I ultimately landed on the EON Super 64. So why? Well, number one, and this is the main selling point really, this is the main headline of the EON Super 64, it's just the easiest, most simple solution for this problem. There are many other solutions that we could be looking at, like the Ultra HDMI, which is one of the things you've probably read about. It's the gold standard of HDMI out for your N64. So why is that not the one that I'm recommending? Well, that one involves actually altering the hardware of your N64. It involves opening it up, soldering boards to the inside, cutting a hole in the back to actually put an HDMI socket into the back of the N64. Not to mention that it's just forever out of stock and impossible to buy and ridiculously expensive. But putting all that aside, it's the actual, even if you can get your hands on one, you're doing work to your N64, and that always kind of breaks my heart a little bit. I want to leave it how it is because, you know, they're not making any more of these things. So that one's out of the window for me. You've got other things like the RetroTink and OSSC and the FrameMeister, things like that, where they might require modifying your N64 so that it outputs RGB before you can even think about using those. And they also require external power sources. So the OSSC, for example, or the RetroTink, that's like an external box that you'll have outside of your console, which you've also got to plug into the wall. You know, let's not pretend this is hugely complex, but it's an extra step that the Super 64 doesn't have. It's literally a small adapter that plugs into the back of the console. It requires no power. It's powered by the console itself. It just replaces the video out of the N64 basically, and you plug a cable into it. That's the headline. This is the simplest solution that you can buy. It's literally plug and play. And we can't talk about that without talking about the cool design of this little box. It's got this nice little foot on the back so that when it's hanging out of your console, that rests on the ground or on the surface of your entertainment center. So it's not bending the output on the console. It's just like, it's beautifully designed. It comes in this little box that's also designed to look like a little N64. You know, they've put some thought into it. And I really like that. It's not some little homebrew project. It's nicely designed, and that means a lot to me. So we've talked about the headline, great thing. Yeah, it's super simple to use. It's very easy. You plug it in and it works. No complex instructions required. What about some of the cons? And I feel like we can't go any further without talking about the big con, in that it's too expensive for what it is. And I say this as someone who loves the little thing, and I use it all the time. It's too expensive. It costs $150, or I think in the UK it's £110, I think I spent on it, which, you know, let's not beat around the bush, that's a lot of money for getting a signal out of a console that you already own. You're spending over £100 or over $100. That's quite a lot. However, that is cheaper than some of the other solutions. It's cheaper than the Ultra HDMI. You're not having to, as I said earlier, you're not having to modify your console in any way to get an RGB out before you've even thought about your box. You're paying your £110 or your $150, and that's all you're buying. You're set. You're done. So yes, it's too expensive, but you know, if you don't mind spending that, it's a one-time purchase. So let's talk about picture quality, because that's very important when you're talking about these. Some of the other options, they'll upscale video or, line doublers and all this. It's kind of simple with the Super 64. It doesn't do any processing, but it's literally just taking the analog signal out of your console and pushing it through HDMI. So you get in your standard 480p, blurry, just a normal HDMI video. Yeah, that's a negative because it doesn't make it sexy and all nice and modern. But also, your games look how N64 games look, and isn't that part of playing on an actual N64 and not emulating your games and stuff? Yeah, I'm 50-50 on this. Like, it would be nice if it did some of that processing, but the games look how I remember them looking. They look perfect. They look how they should on my TV, and it's not a deal breaker for me, but maybe it is for you. The other thing to talk about, though, when we talk about video quality, is that the Super 64 has this feature that I absolutely hate the name of, but they call it Slick Mode. And what Slick Mode is, it's a little button on the side, and when you press it, it does put some filter on the video. And I know what you'll be thinking, because I thought this when I first read this. Everybody's used those filters on emulators that smooth out all the edges and make everything look like a cartoon, and they're universally awful, and none of us should use them. And we all like the pixel perfect and seeing all the pixels as they should be. I was actually really, really surprised when I tried this on my console for the first time, in that it's not terrible, and I do actually find myself using it more often than not. It's really subtle, so it's not really comparable to those filters that we see in emulators, and I'll show some footage here of it. It does smooth out edges, things that tend to show their pixels. It does smooth them out a bit, but it's really subtle. From a distance, it's not really affecting it. I don't know. It's hard to describe without seeing it on a large telly, if I'm honest. I read about this a lot when I was reading reviews before I bought the unit. And I saw loads of screenshots, and I was like, there's absolutely no difference between those two screenshots. But it is noticeable when you're actually using the box, and you can press the switch and turn it on and off at will. It just turns the filter on and off on your screen, so you can happily press it all day. You don't have to boot out and reset your console to do it. I think it's actually quite good. There's certain games that use a lot of 2D sprites. That it tends to make them look a bit too blurry. But on a lot of 3D games, I actually find myself using it more often than not. So if you do pick one of these up, please don't ignore the Slick Mode. It's an awful name, but I think it's actually quite a cool feature. So there's something else that we need to flag about the Super 64. If you're thinking of buying one of these, you have to know it only works with NTSC consoles, which is American consoles, Japanese consoles, not European, basically. If you've got a UK, European, or an Australian N64, this is not the thing for you. They put out a different video signal to NTSC models, and it just won't work with PAL consoles. So straight away, if you're using a UK, European, or an Australian N64, go look elsewhere, because this just won't work. I use it with a Japanese N64, it works perfectly. It'll work perfectly with a US N64, but yeah, PAL owners, no. Something a lot of people will be wondering about is lag, because some of these adapters you can buy, particularly the really cheap ones that you'll buy, and you'll see these on Amazon. If you've ever searched Amazon for HDMI converter, you'll find all these boxes that I've used before. If you've ever seen any N64 footage on the channel before, I've used one of these cheap HDMI converters that I bought from Amazon for like £10, £20 maybe. And they're terrible. You can't play games with them. They're made for DVD players, they're made for VCR players. They just have an insane amount of lag. They're not made for retro consoles. You press jump when you're using one of those boxes, and you wait in a second for your character to jump on TV. They're fine for me capturing some video for the channel, but there's no way I would ever play a game with one. The Super 64 has no lag. It's one-to-one. It's just straight through. It's the main selling point. I mean, it's made for the N64. You're not using this for anything else. So that's not a concern with this box. It's 100% lag-free, made for the console. Beautiful. So what have we got when we look back at this little box? It's too expensive. It doesn't work on PAL consoles. and it doesn't do any snazzy video processing. So your image you're getting on your TV is your classic blurry N64 480p video. On the flip side, it's super simple to use. You take it out of the box, you plug it in, you're away. It's completely lag-free, which is the biggest plus. And it's got this cool little slick mode thing, which does do a little bit of filtering. Ultimately, I use this thing all the time. If I didn't have this thing, let's be honest, I wouldn't be playing N64 on my TV. But I've looked into other solutions, and for me, this ticked the right boxes. And I really do recommend it. I think if the price isn't a concern to you, and I don't want to say that's a nothing issue because it is expensive, but if that price isn't too much for you, and you're only interested in getting actual N64 video out, and you're not really that bothered about having it upscaled and all that nonsense, if you just want it to be how it should be and how it's meant to look, and the price isn't an issue for you, I think it's the right box. I think it's really impressive for what it is. It's a simple solution. It looks nice. You'll plug it into your console and never think about it again, and it kind of does what it says on the tin. So yeah, it's a funny one. It's not insanely exciting, but there are tons of us who are looking for these HDMI out solutions, and there's loads and loads and loads of options, ranging from the cheapest, crappiest things which you definitely shouldn't buy to really expensive options where you have to open up your console. And the middle ground is this, I think. It's a one-time purchase, plug it in, never think about it again, and it works. And I think there's value in that. So that's my review. I think if you've been looking for a box to get this kind of video out of your console, this might be the one for you. If it is, tell me in the comments. If you've used one of the other solutions like the OSSC or the FrameMeister or the RetroTink or the Ultra HDMI, then tell me why I'm wrong and why everyone should be using those. But yeah, thank you for watching, and maybe I'll see you again. Bye.